Museums and the Missouri Association of Museums and Archives, and he is a student at Truman State University, and he is organizing our Show Me Missouri Museums and Archives speakers. So welcome to all of you. We'll take one quick moment to thank the Missouri Humanities Council for their sponsorship, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Levi, and let you get us started.
Okay. Okay. We're good. Okay. Hi everyone. I don't know. Are we ready, Sarah? Good. Okay. Sorry. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Show Me Programs webinar that we have. Sarah and I and a couple other people have been working really hard to put together. Just because we see that what COVID has done to a lot of the institutions across the state of Missouri, and it's shuttering people in, so can't go out and very much anymore. I would like to go ahead and thank the Missouri Humanities Council for able to put this on for us. It's been great working on this, and I hope we can get more institutions going on. I would like to introduce Mr. Mark Adams. He is with the Truman Library Museum, and today he'll be showing us the newly renovated sneak peek of his facilities. They've been doing a full renovation, and he's going to be showing us some of the exhibits that they are developing before they're reopening in fall. And I do want to do a quick reminder that we're going to be doing, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, both in Facebook Live and in here. And then towards the end, we'll be able to go through and answer those questions and have a discussion at the end. I think that is all on my side. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Levi, and thank you, Sarah and Linda, and the Missouri Association of Museums and Archives. It's my pleasure to present you today. And looking at the screen, I see so many familiar names. I'm not going to call them all out, but some friends and colleagues of mine on the video. So thanks for everybody. I know there's lots of choices with all these video webinars and things. This one's going to be fairly short, I hope, 25 to 30 minutes. Going to show you some renditions of what our museum's exhibits are going to look like when we reopen, and maybe some photographs of work in progress. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. If you want to type your questions in the box so we don't get everyone's audio all at once, I'll try to get those as we go. Probably capture most of the questions at the end because it might be hard to keep an eye on the video and the PowerPoint and the chat box all at the same time. But if I can do that, that's great. And if you're on Facebook Live, you can comment in there too. And I believe we're going to try and copy the questions over here so we can see them. So I'm going to share my screen and continue to talk, but the screen should show you my PowerPoint of some images. And some of them are fresh off the press from this morning. One of my engineers in the building took some photographs this morning. And I know some of you are probably familiar with some of our artist renditions of what the exhibits should look like. So I'm going to start with that and give you a little bit of overview of the project, and then go in and show you some of the latest photographs from inside the building as well. And so that's what we're going to be looking at in the next 20 or 30 minutes is what the museum renovation looks like at the moment. Just in terms of time frame, we're hoping to open in November of this year. The pandemic has not really slowed the renovation itself too much, although none of the federal employees are currently in the building and haven't been since March. We're very lucky that the construction has been able to continue. So that's kind of exciting. Here's one of the most shared images of our graphics from our exhibit contractor showing this 14-foot high globe. And I'm going to show you the latest on that globe a little bit later on, but that's kind of going to be the centerpiece of the new museum exhibits. Let me give you a quick overview of what this renovation is going to look like. Some of you are more familiar with this than others based on the audience that I saw there. And I see people from St. Louis to Kirksville to Kansas City to Columbia. So it's great to have the whole state represented. So one of the main things that you're going to see when we reopen in the fall is the main museum entrance that you're familiar with if you've been to our building in the past is going to move to the east side. And one of my photos later is going to show you the east side as of this morning. So that's kind of exciting. All of the Truman story from his birth to death will be told on one level. And currently, you know, the previous museum showed that story of his early life downstairs and the Truman presidency upstairs. While this renovated museum will have all of that story on one level in chronological order. There will be some topics that maybe weren't highlighted as much before that we're going to focus on in the new exhibits. And then there's going to be some increased multimedia and interactivity. And then we're going to be showing more artifacts than we have ever shown before through these new museum exhibits. One thing we're really excited about is actually where we don't have any exhibits, which is downstairs, where we used to have our early life of Truman exhibit, is now going to be 2 temporary galleries. So we will always have a temporary exhibit on display while we rotate through. People often ask over the last 6 to 9 months about things that they're worried that might go away. And so I wanted to reinforce and let you know that there are some things that are not changing. The Benton mural that's painted directly on the wall in our old main entrance will stay in that same place. We will be adding some more interpretation for that, but the painting will stay on the wall. The most humorous one that we get asked about is the Truman grave sites. Those will remain untouched. I'm sure you're relieved to hear. And then the Oval Office that you're probably familiar with, and the Truman Working Office, the office that Truman actually worked in the building, those will remain untouched also, although there will be some new interpretive panels into the Oval Office, and you can actually step in a little further into the office than currently the case. And then our classrooms, our auditorium, and the White House Decision Center are not affected by the renovation. So with that, let's go ahead and see some of the images. This is the artist rendition of what our new exhibit looks like. And you know, when you get these graphics from graphic designers and things, the sky's always blue, and the child here with the balloon and beautiful trees and foliage and things. So it's always kind of fun to see, you know, the ideal situation for what the graphics are intended. But I think you'll be stunned by this next photo. It was taken this morning, as I mentioned, by one of our engineers. The landscaping is not done, but take a look at this. So this is our new main entrance, pretty close. I mean, it's a little closer in photo than that last one. You can see the construction crew on the roof there, and our brand new presidential seal on the entrance. And those familiar with the building, this is our east side. So where you would have come in for special events or workshops, or where students come into the decision center. You can't tell really it's from this vantage point, but this actually bumps out about 20 feet from the side of the building, and this was not there before. If you could see all the way through, you'd be able to see the grave site all the way through the other side of this image. So we're pretty excited about the way that it's come together in terms of our new grand entrance. And the old entrance is nothing's happening to that. They're just closing that off and protecting the Benton mural that's inside that entrance by not allowing the natural light in that entrance. It may well be used for special events and things like that, but this entrance now will be the new main entrance. The block here on the left will be for banners and signage for any particular exhibits and programming that we're going to highlight at any given time. I don't have images of this, but there will be a new Truman statue on the exterior of the building that's been created and is being shipped and installed within the next 3 months. So that will be at to the right of this entrance. Exact placement of that is still to be determined. This is a photo from the Independence Examiner, actually, that they ran a story in the last week And I just thought it was pretty neat because you can see the guy working. It actually looks like he's taken some photographs himself. But then you can see the reverse of the presidential seal. So this is inside that entrance that I just mentioned to you. Well, you didn't sign up for this webinar to see the exterior shots, right? You want to see the inside. Let's hope if I've memorized things right. I'm going to show you what looks like. This is a graphic design that was given to us. And one of the earlier parts of the exhibit will look at the Truman family tree and also Bess Wallace Truman family tree as well, this family roots. And the next image is going to show you what that section is beginning to look like inside the building. It looks like a flat wall on this graphic from our design company, but in fact, it's this curved wall on the interior of the building. This photo was taken today, so it's as new as you can get. And as you can see, we're a long way from being done, but you'll see these 4 rectangles on the right and the 4 rectangles on the left. I'm going to go back. Those are the rectangles that represent the various family members that are going to be featured on this family tree. So this is kind of the first main gallery. There is a short 2 to 3 minute video before you come into this piece, into this space. But you can see the work in progress on this will be the family roots of Truman. And then this whole gallery where these benches are, we'll be looking at Truman's early life up through World War I in this particular space. The area on the left is a discovery wall called Lasting Impressions, where we look at all of the different things that left an impression on Truman when he was a young man, both from childhood into early adulthood. So his first car, his schooling, and it's highly interactive. The next will be a graphic representation of one of the major multimedia pieces that we're adding, which is a 7-minute video on Truman's experiences during World War I. Those of you that know your Truman history know that he was a captain in World War I. And in the front of this video screen, you'll see graphically represented here the field gun and caisson that Truman would have had in France 100 years ago. And let me show you what that now looks like in progress. And it's not very impressive. It's this wall is the, again, taken this morning. This platform that you see at the front will be where the caisson and the field gun will be situated. And then this long wall is where the video will be projected to. You may be wondering about these plastic wrapped up objects. If I was doing a student presentation right now, I'd probably ask you to see if you could guess what they were and type in the box. We're not going to make you do that work today. You didn't know you signed up for anything like that. Those are what we are in the building calling World War I trees. So there's going to be some landscape and features around this video that you will see mud and dirt and sandbags and so forth. And these trees are going to be made up of the landscape that the video will project onto. As you can see, it really is a work in progress, but you all work in museums, so you know what these looks like. On the other area that deals with World War I is a kind of a round gallery. Prior to that, that video theater, you can see Truman on horseback here and the soldiers celebrating Armistice Day, November 11th, 1918. What you're going to see at the moment, the progress that's being made at the moment, is that the crews from the exhibit company, and these are being installed by 1220, who are based out of Nashville, they're putting in what we call the wallpaper, the backdrops. So we're not at the point yet of putting in artifacts. And I think I heard on a call this morning that they're beginning to start the exhibit case installation in the next week or two. So you're not really going to see any artifacts on display today, but you will see a lot of the backdrops, a lot of the wallpaper. So with these backdrops, then you're going to see exhibit cases in front of them once everything is installed. So Truman's World War I uniforms and things like that. But you can see in this round area will be dedicated to World War I. In the background, we're going to have a closer up of that. As soon as Truman comes home from France in 1919, he gets married. And you can see the marriage photo in the background. And there's a closer up of that. Again, you can see the wedding photo with the flowers on the wall, and then some exchanges of quotes from their letters back and forth during that time period. This is going to be holding exhibit cases and reader rails later on. In the background, you can see the US Capitol. And so this whole area is post-World War I, and it goes from 1919 to 1945, when Truman becomes vice president and FDR dies. And then Pendergast and some other issues are dealt with in these areas. The other photo I have from this area is Truman's haberdashery business. And that has been installed. This is on site. You can see the photograph of Truman inside the haberdashery in the early 20s. And as we have so many museum people on for a museum association presentation, I should point out that these drawers, the ones with the handles on them, all pull out and all contain either additional information or interactives, and they mimic the drawers in the haberdashery that you can see here. Some of the artifacts will be displayed in here. One of them is the loving cup that was given to Truman by the soldiers in France that he was the captain of, and they gave him that cup on the boat ride home across the Atlantic, and he displayed that in the haberdashery. And so we're going to have that loving cup on display in this part of the exhibits, along with exciting artifacts like a hat stretcher and things like, and stationery from the Truman Jacobson haberdashery. So we're pretty excited about that particular display. And then the graphic that a lot of you have seen in our promotion and publicity, this is we've fast forwarded in time because I don't really have images of some of those areas in between, but post World War II and post the atomic bomb, which is discussed in detail in the new exhibits. I just don't have images for you today about that, but be glad to ask any questions about that later on. Is a 14-foot high globe that you see a graphic representation of, and there'll be 3 video projections on the outside of this globe showing all of the issues that were happening in the world in 1945. I'm going to pause for a moment and see if I can read Matt Reeves' question from Kansas City Library about high quality facsimiles. What we're doing, Matt, that's a great question for a museum and archives audience. The artifacts that we're going to have on display, the 3-dimensional artifacts, the objects are all going to be real. A lot of the documents, the original documents are not going to be displayed. It will be color facsimiles, high quality, high definition images, because the image, when you've got a Truman letter, you cannot really anymore put the original on display for a very long period of time. There is some discussion of opening with the original and then replacing that with a high definition color image. It's a little easier to do that with paper than 3-dimensional, as you can imagine. And then, is the library going the facsimile route for India? I think I answered that question. Okay, thanks, Matt. And that's a great question. And I can go into a little bit more of that later. So this is what our graphic design group have worked with. And we're going to have those 3 projections on the outside, and you'll see there's a crack in the middle. I'll talk about the inside of that globe here in a moment. On the right side, you can see what it looks like. This is in Nashville, in the workshop at 1220 exhibits in Nashville. And these are the segments of the globe. Now, this photo was actually, I'm cheating. This photo was actually taken in February, but they have not transported them yet. So their scenic crew are working on those. The exterior is going to be 3-dimensional and have LED lights on them. And then, as I mentioned, it'll also be a projection surface too. You can actually go inside of the globe, and we're going to have 3 touchscreen monitors inside of the globe where you can explore different areas of the globe and what families are experiencing post 1945. So what does the world look like after the end of World War II in Europe and Asia? And then on the outside, video projections of all of the different crises around the globe. So in Asia, there'll be newsreel from the 1940s about problems in Asia. In Europe, there'll be 1940s newsreel from Europe. On the Americas, same thing, projected on the correct areas of the globe. And then visitors walk around them. Those will all be silent newsreel that you can look at all of the different problems around the globe. The exterior of that gallery, you can see the images where visitors are looking at exhibits, will be all of the things that Truman tries to do to solve these problems. Of course, some of those things he ignores, some of those things he tries, some of those things he succeeds, some of those things he fails. But it's all the attempts to try and solve all of these, what we call hard problems of peace post 1945. So we're pretty excited about that particular showpiece of the exhibit gallery. This is part of that space is looking at how Europe is in ruins. And there's a video theater looking at how the Cold War began, particularly in Europe, and what Europe looked like. And the projection will actually be on rubble. Internally, we're calling it the rubble theater. There'll be rubble on the ground and in the wall that video projections using projection mapping will project onto the rubble for people to explore how the Cold War began, particularly in Europe, but a nod towards Asia by the time we get to 1949 and the Chinese communist takeover. One of the areas, of course, well known for the Truman Library is the Berlin Airlift. And those of you familiar with our exhibit that we currently had, that's all been dismantled, that had 594 planes hanging from the ceiling. Those 594 planes are coming back. They're just not shown in this graphic, but you'll see how we're dealing with the Berlin Airlift here in the graphic form. And then let me show you what that looked like today. This, if I go back, I want you to take note of this plane and the people looking at it. And this is that photo that we see in the graphic representation. And then you see there's still some space to be built in, but this area deals with the Marshall Plan, the Truman Doctrine, the Berlin Airlift, and you see these sacks of flour inside the fuselage of the plane. We actually are going to have a three-dimensional fuselage that's going to jut out from the wall, and this is still in Nashville, but you can see where that's in progress. And then these windows of the plane will actually all be monitors that you can glean more information. One of those monitors will tell the story of Gail Halvorson, the candy bomber. And if you don't know that story, ask me at the end or Google it. We can all do that, right? Gail Halvorson, the chocolate flyer, the candy bomber. He's still alive. He's in his late 90s. He was a pilot during Berlin that dropped candy to children. And so this is going to be part of that display. And then I've skipped over recognition of Israel 1948 election and civil rights because they haven't installed anything there yet. But when we get into Truman's second term, we deal with the Red Scare and the Loyalty Oath program. This is a graphic representation on the right of students going through a Loyalty Oath interactive program. And you can see what that would look like with some of the accused and some of those blacklisted. And exhibits will deal with the Hollywood 10 and those kinds of things. And we're very excited that the table is in production. Very exciting sneak peek there, showing you a table that will be used to hold these monitors. And then this will be a 7-minute interactive that one person can do, or 5 or 6 people can do at once, where they are accused of not being loyal to the United States government. So pretty topical and really exciting interactive that we're going to have in that part of the gallery right before the Korean War, which I don't believe I have images of either. Later on, towards the end of the exhibit, we're going to have these Truman connections. So Truman connecting to civil rights, public education, healthcare, and how those issues connect today. Sarah asked a question, what companies are doing the design and fabrication? I should have started with that, and I apologize. The design is being done by Gallagher and Associates out of their San Francisco office. The fabrication is being done by 1220 in Nashville. The multimedia is being done by Monadnock Media in Connecticut. Our general contractor is J.E. Dunn, and our architects are Clark Ennison. And I think I got them all without looking it up. So that was exciting. And then I know you're relieved to know that the Benton mural remained untouched. It was sealed until about last week. It was completely protected while they were working on the old main entrance of the building. And that was all sealed up. They just unsealed it, I guess, last week. We had temperature and humidity controls being monitored throughout the process, and it seems to have come through unscathed. A couple of other areas, as we've gone through the chronology of Truman's presidency, we do have two thematic areas. One deals with Truman and independence, where he lived, grew up, lived before he was president and after he was president, and also Truman in Washington, D.C., because he was there as a senator and as president for almost 20 years. And Will deals with the family and also the White House renovation in that area. And so on the left, you'll see the graphic representation of the Trumans in Washington with these columns, and then the exhibits behind it, which show you the spaces in Washington, D.C. and the things that they did as a family during those almost 20 years. And then in Nashville, at 1220, has the beginnings of the creation of these White House columns that will be installed. And for those familiar with the building, this space is our old gift shop. So that's where our old gift shop used to be, will be where the Trumans are in Washington. As I mentioned before, the Oval Office is not changing, and the Buck Stops Here sign will still be on display, but all of the exhibits outside of that space will change, and they will be dealing with the three branches of government. So they'll deal with Truman's relationship with the Supreme Court, Truman's relationships with Congress, and Truman as the executive branch leader. And particularly looking at a couple of case studies where those institutions go against him. So the case study for the Supreme Court will be the steel crisis, when the Supreme Court overrules Truman seizing the steel mills, and for Congress, where they override his veto of the Taft-Hartley bill. So you get a sense of the balance of power and presidential power through the three branches of government, which we're excited about for our civics education programs. There is a fly-through online. If you've not seen that, you can go to trumanlibraryinstitute.org, and they have a fly-through available. It's about a 7-minute video. I didn't think I should waste our time doing that today. You can do that for yourselves, and you can always email me for that link, because there's my email address, and I'm going to stop the screen and then take any questions. And this is from our current Oval Office. That's not changing, but it is empty right now. But I used it as my Zoom background today. It seemed pretty topical. And this is one of our third graders who's expressing wonder and awe. And I hope that when you come to see our new museum in November, crossing fingers about November, that you'll also have wonder and awe, and you can pretend like you're a third grader. Okay, I'm gonna switch back to just the video. And if you have questions, you can go ahead and type those in the box. And we did that just under 29 minutes. So that was perfect. I wasn't even looking at the clock. I see Candy Saul on there, and I see Katie Hazard and Cecilia, and my friend Maggie in Columbia, and my buddy Matt in Kansas City, and a bunch of others. I see Erica from Gladstone. Don't be shy. Ask a question. Ethan said, you mentioned a lot of the new exhibits will be on just a lot of new artifacts. Are there any new artifacts decided to be displayed at the first time? Actually, Ethan, that's a great question. We, a couple of institutions related to the Korean War closed, Over the last few years, a museum in Illinois and the Center for the Study of the Korean War in Independence both closed, and we took on those collections. So our Korean War displays are going to have 4 uniforms that we've never displayed before, MASH equipment and materials looking at treatment of soldiers at the front and things like that, walkie-talkies, which are huge. So lots of new materials related to the Korean War, which have never been displayed at the Truman Library before. So off the top of my head, those are probably some of the most exciting artifacts because they've never been seen before, at least in Missouri. They may well have seen them in Illinois. We inherited their whole museum collection, which was more than 75 uniforms. And we're going to have 4 or 5 on those, including some females, including prisoner of war uniform. So that's pretty exciting. Events planning for the grand reopening, Amanda. Great question, to be determined. As you can imagine, COVID has put we have to wait and see about events. We're hoping, of course, to be grand and have celebrities and VIPs and even former presidents, but to be determined. Linda, economic implications of COVID. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to scroll back up because we're getting a lot of questions. Almost all of the funding for this has been privately fundraised, even though we're a federal building. There's been some federal funding for things like new air conditioner, but the rest of the $25 million, the majority of it, the higher, really 90% plus, is through our Truman Library Institute's private fundraising that's been going on for a while. Certainly in the last 6 months, it's been more difficult to fundraise, but they're very much right at their goal as it is. So we've been very fortunate in terms of the economic implications. Let me see the next one. The process of how your staff work with exhibit designers. That's a great question, Sarah. I will be honest with you. I was around for the last renovation of the museum because I've been at the library since 1997. And in 2001, the staff didn't get a whole lot of input. We still enjoyed the exhibits, but they were not involved in as much. This time, there's been a team of staff, including myself as education director, the museum director, and the archivist, supervisory archivist, Sam Richet. The 3 of us have been on a team working with the exhibit designers right from the very beginning. And then we've branched that out to include our audiovisual archivist, our archivists, our museum technicians, our registrar, and others as needed as we've gone more into the detail. So we have been involved right from the beginning, which is a wonderful process. And I'd like to pay credit to our director, Kurt Graham, for encouraging that all the way through the process. Rachel asked, what are some of the temporary exhibits being planned and how often will they rotate out? Well, I think there's some talk about a Korean War exhibit because I can't do the math, but there will be an anniversary about that coming up. It started with 1950 and to 2020, we're 70 years. I think that's a photographic exhibit. In terms of how often they rotate out, my guess is 6 to 9 months. A lot of those are traveling exhibits, so you have to go by their schedule. After that, to be determined. Sorry, can't be more precise than that. Matt asks, what is the most difficult big picture you and the staff have had to make during the renovation? You know, big picture. My answer is going to be more about getting into the weeds, but sometimes there's things you just can't include. We do some volunteer training and the volunteers are like, what about this story? What about this story? Because they know every story and we can't include all of them. Originally, I'll be honest with you guys, originally the expansion of the museum building was going to be larger. Because of federal cutbacks, we were not able to expand the footprint of the building as much as we would like. And that led to some cutbacks in terms of how much square footage you could devote to a particular section of the exhibit. And I think the early part of Truman's life suffered a little bit, although we're pretty pleased with how it came out. But I think we wanted to dedicate a little bit more to his early life. And those were some of the compromises you have to make. I feel like a politician. Sarah, we have a question from Facebook. Will the overhead and audio in the Oval Office still going to be running after the renovation? I love questions like this because yes, it is, but it's actually going to be improved because the location of the speaker before was not in a great place. They're relocating the speaker, and I can use museum technology speak. There's a reader rail, an exhibit rail in the front of the Oval Office, and the speaker is going to be embedded in that rail. So you're right next to the speaker. I hope that answered that question. But yes, it's going to be, and it's going to be better, I promise. Can you discuss the process you went through preparing the museum and library for renovation? I'm trying to think of exactly what you mean there, Levi. The library and the research room is not affected. The museum, of course, had to be emptied out completely and was done in phases. We were very fortunate last summer to have a number of summer interns that helped us with the deinstallation of exhibits and putting those away correctly. I think the biggest issue seems very rudimentary and simple was space, because usually everything's on display, or a lot of things are on display, and we didn't actually have enough storage space for everything. So that became a challenge, particularly our cars. We have 3 cars in our collection, so those kept getting moved around. Maggie, my friend Maggie at the State Historical Society, what do you think kids, students will be most interested in? What are you excited to share with younger visitors? The interactive wall that we call Lasting Impressions, we're pretty excited about that. The multimedia interactivity around the Cold War and the Red Scare, I think is going to be pretty unique. And then the touchscreen interactive related to Thomas Hart Benton's mural, Independence and the Opening of the West, where you can explore the mural in detail through a touchscreen display. In terms of excited to share with the younger visitors, I think it's going to make more sense now, having the story all on one level and seeing the transition of a schoolboy who's wearing glasses all the way to presidency, all on one level. I think is going to make it easier for younger visitors to understand. Linda asked about Kurt Graham. He was keynote at the conference and he talked about the renovation. Kurt is amazing, and that's only, he's going to see this video later, so I'm definitely going to say that. A question from Facebook: will there be information about Truman's daughter in the renovations? Yes, in fact, one of the areas that we've beefed up is more information both about Bess, his wife, and Margaret, his daughter. Her tricycle will be on display, her buggy, and from her childhood, and there'll be a timeline of Truman's daughter, Margaret, up to World War II. So, her up until she's in her 20s, she was born in 24. So 0 to 20, there's going to be a timeline showing her early life in the period between the wars, really. She's going to be featured quite heavily in that area. Let's see, another question. The most difficult big picture decision. I kind of answered that a little bit in terms of selecting content when you really can't include everything and having to trim back some of the early life of Truman. That was probably the biggest decision, I think. What will be newly on display? Question from Facebook. I mentioned the Korean War materials. Those are the things that come to mind. I think one thing that's a little different, they've both been on display before, but we're putting them together to make a point, is the safety plug from the atomic bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. It's been on display before, but it will be highlighted in a cylindrical room, highlighting Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb. But in the same gallery will be a peace crane created by Sadako. Some of you are very probably familiar with the children's book, Sadako and the Paper Cranes, and the 1,000 Paper Cranes. Those 2 artifacts are going to be displayed in the same room and juxtaposed next to each other, or one in front of the other, one at the front, middle of the room and one at the back of the room, to look at Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb and then the implications of that and the reconciliation between independence itself, the city, and the Truman family with Japan. So that'll be an interesting discussion area that will be highlighted by the use of those two objects. Those, I believe, are the only two artifacts in that room. So we're really highlighting those objects to help tell that story. Date for the opening is tentative, November-ish, 2020. Don't hold us to that. COVID is causing some supply delays, and the multimedia company that I mentioned earlier are having some issues getting the master footage from some of the film shops, which are currently closed, including the National Archives, who is our parent agency. So that will slow some of the production of the exhibits. But as you can see, the exhibit installation is going on. The artifact installation is scheduled for later in this summer. And then we're hoping for November 2020. We will obviously be announcing that as we get closer to September or so. Great questions. You're wearing me out. This is fun. Anything else? I do want to reassure you, I didn't skip over. I didn't have images of all of the things on display. There'll be a nice feature of the 1948 election, a whistle-stop campaign. There'll be an area on Truman and civil rights. There'll be an area on Truman and recognition of Israel, and a large area on the Korean War. The Korean War area will include a video, and then also 4 or 5 uniforms. The Purple Heart that we've had on display before, which has a very emotional letter from the Banning family that comes along with that. That will be highlighted in that area as well. Any other questions?
Okay. I think that covers a lot of it. I like to thank you, Mark, for this presentation. It was phenomenal.
Thank you. And I'll stay online. I can stay online for a few minutes if people want to stay on and chat or ask a question as people start to sign out, if that would help. Sometimes people like, it's kind of like going up to the podium and talking to the speaker afterwards. So if people want to do that virtually, I'll stick around for a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Levi.
Thanks. So I want to thank you all for joining us today for our very first Show Me program webinar. We do have a couple more coming in the near future. Let's see. I think the next one we have coming up would be the history on the square at Springfield. I think